Okay, awesome. Well, I'll come back to the title of this talk in a second, but before that, I'd like to do a small introduction. So, my name is Mathilde. It's a bit cliché, but I'm super excited to be here today. So, my name is Mathilde Buenerd. My surname is not easy to pronounce, so we can just avoid saying it. By the way, it's the first time I come to Verona, so I took some time to look around, and I actually found some restaurant that looked like my name. So maybe I have an Italian cousin here or something. I don't know, but it made me even more excited to be here. So apart from that, I spent the past 4 years working at Shopify as a front-end developer, but I just actually quitted my job like last Friday. So I guess I'm a free developer now, I guess. I'm also a web accessibility specialist, and although I am from France originally, I currently live in Madrid, in Spain. So let's start with the basics. The title of this talk is why you should learn about some acronym. Just raise your hand if you know how to pronounce this word. I see one. Okay, that's one. That's really good. So I don't know about you, but I hate acronyms because first, you don't know what acronyms mean, and second, you don't know how to pronounce them. And I talk from experience because I spent a long time not knowing what people were saying when they were pronouncing this, and I wish somebody would have told me before. So this is pronounced WCAG, okay? I'm not the grammar police. You're still free to pronounce it how you want, but at least if you hear about this, now you know. So now that we're done with the grammatical formalities, the main purpose of this talk is to convince you to learn about this. So what is WCAG? I'm not going to let the suspense go. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it's basically the main standard for accessibility today. So what gives this standard that much legitimacy compared to others? So first, a little disclaimer, I'm not paid to tell you this. I don't work for WCAG. I'm not paid by a company that maintains this. I'm just a front-end developer. I have expertise in accessibility, and I wish websites would have a better accessibility. And I think knowing about this is the best way to do that. So to understand why this standard is important, we need to go back in time and look a bit into the history of the web. So in 1989, Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web, and it experienced rapid growth in the years that followed that. The thing is, at the time, different vendors were offering different formats of HTML. Everybody was doing a bit what they wanted, and it means the same web page would look different on different browsers. That's why in 1994, the same Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, to develop common protocols and guidelines for the web. The mission of W3C was, and is still as of today, to promote a universal web by creating and maintaining web standards. And universality is central. It's from there that emerged the idea that the web had to be usable for anyone, regardless of their capabilities and their disabilities. So in 1997, the W3C created the World Accessibility Initiative, which was focusing on improving accessibility for people with disabilities. The purpose was to develop guidelines and resources to help developers make better websites. So in 1999, the World Accessibility Initiative published a first official set of guidelines that was the WCAG version 1. It outlined basic principles for making the web content accessible. And most of these guidelines, they're still valid today, like providing text description for images, like using the alt attribute, or paying attention to flickering content for people who have photosensitive epilepsy, for example. And since 1999, new versions of WCAG have come out in 2008, in 2018, and in 2023. Why newer version? Well, because the web changed, no? In 1999, the web was not what it is today, and so the standard had to adapt to take this into account. For example, more was added about mobile or touch screen accessibility. Now we're at version 2.2, and basically the two last versions are the one you should be looking at today. The reason why I tell this story is to understand that WCAG isn't the proprietary standard, and it isn't a trend. It's been there for 25 years. It has adapted to its time, and it's worked on by the most important organization related to the web today. So this is really something that's meant to stay. And also because this is something that has so much legitimacy, it has become a go-to reference for lawmakers. So in this image, you can see countries that have governmental policies related to web accessibility in 2023. It's not exhaustive, but you can see Canada, the US, Argentina, China, India, Australia, New Zealand, and all of European Union. In the European Union, more specifically, we have the European Accessibility Act that took effect in 2019. Out of curiosity, again, who heard about this? A couple, a bit more. If you haven't heard about it, you probably should check, because it says that all companies that have more than 10 employees need to have their services, including website and mobile apps, accessible for people with disabilities. It means if you're offering your services over the internet, if you're having an e-commerce website, well, this law is affecting you. And companies have been let up until June 2025 to comply with the law. It means that from 2025, customers will be able to file complaints before national courts if services and products do not respect accessibility. This is like in a year. And this is not surprising, because similar laws have been in place in other parts of the world, and especially on the other side of the ocean. In the United States, the Accessibility Disability Act has been in place for longer, and it similarly allows consumers to sue companies whose services are inaccessible. And over there, lawsuits are increasing. I hear from people saying that they think they're not concerned by the rise of accessibility as a legal requirement, because accessibility doesn't apply to their product, or maybe they don't have any disabled consumers, but it very likely does. According to the World Health Organization, there's about 15% of people in the world that have a form of disability. And this number is on the rise because of aging population. So in the US, companies like Domino's Pizza or even Playboy have been found guilty of not being accessible and have been ordered by courts to solve their accessibility problems or be fined. I mean, if it happened to like a pizza delivery website or online magazine for adult website, it can probably happen to you too. So on top of that, some studies have shown that in 2003, about 96% of homepages had detective accessibility issues. I think we are part of those 96%. So coming back to our map of countries with web accessibility policies, the good part is that although each country has their own law, the accessibility requirements everywhere are the same. And the reason why they are the same is that they all use WCAG as a baseline to define what it means to be accessible. Basically, they say that being accessible equals complying with WCAG. And that's great news for us, because it means if we learn this, then we know how to make a website conformant all around the world. Okay, so I hope I convinced you why WCAG is so important. Now I'd like to go a bit deeper into what it's actually made of and how you can leverage it. So here's a screenshot of the WCAG quick reference, and I make quote imitations with my hands because although it's named quick reference, you can see from the screenshot that it's actually quite dense. I don't expect you to read anything that's on this screenshot, by the way. The sole purpose of it is to show that this is long and that there is a lot of content. To give a brief overview, WCAG is divided in 4 sections, and each section has more guidelines. A section is basically a big category, and a guideline is a small category that also contains stuff. The 4 sections are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. In the perceivable section, you'll have a lot about how to make content perceptible for people with different sensory abilities. Typically, how to make visual content like images and videos accessible for people who don't see or who have visual impairments, or how to make audio content accessible for people who have auditory impairments. In the operable section, you have a lot about how to make the page navigable for people who have motor disabilities. There are guidelines about keyboard accessibility, about how to make a page compatible with different input mechanisms, Like, what if you use a mouse? What if you don't use a mouse? What if you use a touchscreen? What if you use a keyboard? In understandable, it goes a lot about how to write content that's easy to comprehend or that's easy for people to understand. Also, how to provide clear instructions and on actions or on inputs. And finally, robust is about using proper HTML to ensure compatibility with browsers and with assistive technologies. So all those criteria cover accessibility for people with a wide range of disabilities, like visual, auditory, motor, cognitive disability as well. It's very wide, and I won't go over all of that because, well, we have 30 minutes. But trust me, there are a lot, and WCAG is a standard that's really research-based and that made a lot of studies to try to include as many people as possible. So this was a very high overview because each of these guidelines, so each of these subcategory also contains a set of criteria, where criteria is basically a requirement, something that needs to be done for a website to be accessible. So if we look, for example, at the perceivable/distinguishable guideline, we find 13 different requirements inside that. So on this slide, I put the criteria with the purple background. I didn't put all of them because 13 is a lot, but it gives you an idea of how wide are the topic covered. In this section, we have criteria about use of color. So typically don't use color to convey meaning, because some people might be colorblind, some people might not see color the same way. About audio control, we're going to talk about that in a second. About color contrast, make sure people can read the text. About resizing text, make sure people can zoom in the page and still access the content. About images of text, make sure that you avoid using images of text if you can use real HTML text. About text spacing, taking into consideration that text spacing might affect the way people can read content. About content and hover and focus, pay attention to the fact that some people might not have hover, might not have focus, etc. So in total, within all the different guidelines, there are 87 WCAG requirements. That's quite a lot, so that's why we won't go over all of this today. But what I'd like to do is to go over one requirement to see a bit how it's made, and it's going to give you an idea of how you can leverage the rest. So I choose the audio control one because it's quite an interesting one. So I took this screenshot from the WCAG Quick Reference website. So this is a summary of the requirement, and each summary basically looks like this. So what do we see here? First, we see a name, here, audio control, and then there's a short description. Here it says, if any audio on a web page plays automatically for more than 3 seconds, either a mechanism is available to pause or to stop the audio, or a mechanism is available to control audio volume independently from the overall system volume level. It's a bit verbose, I know. Some criteria are more simple, some are more complex. I would say this one is more on the complex side, but if you didn't entirely get it, it's okay. We're going to go a bit into the details in a second. The second thing that you can see is a level. Here it's A. There are 3 levels, A, AA, AAA. A is basically a basic level. It's the thing that you need to get right. If you're like not respecting an A-level criteria, you should try to fix it ASAP. AA is a higher level. It's also something you should fix, but it's a bit less important. And AAA is the highest level, some kind of enhanced level. You might not always be able to fix it, but you can try to. So here's an A level. It means it's a basic requirement. The third element we see here is an understanding button. So this links to a new page where it explains more in details why this has to be done. So I'm curious about this one, actually. So let's have a look at it. So I've clicked the button, and now I'm on this page that explains the intent. And it provides more information about why we need to do that. So what I read is like, individuals who use screen reading software can find it hard to hear the speech output if there is audio playing at the same time. This difficulty is exacerbated when the screen reader's speech output is software-based and is controlled via the same volume control as the sound. Therefore, it is important that the user be able to turn off the background sound. Okay, so what I learned here is 2 things. First, audio on the page can prevent the screen reader user to hear the screen reader. It's like if you're watching a movie and I'm talking to you, you cannot hear the movie, right? And second, the screen reader audio output is the same as the web page audio output. It means if a screen reader user is annoyed by the sound, they cannot just decrease it because it's going to decrease the sound of their screen reader and they won't be able to hear it. That's why they need a separate way to control the sound of the website. So I don't know what you think, but I wouldn't have guessed all of that by just reading the description. So that's quite interesting. Going back to the requirements, you have also what's called techniques, which are basically example of good code or example of good UX, and failures, which are example of bad code and bad UX. Techniques and failures are very useful because if you find an issue on your website and you find the WCAG criteria that correspond to this issue, you can find concrete ways to solve it using HTML, JavaScript, or area. They also provide some test procedure. So in this example, I clicked on one of the technique and they say, okay, imagine you have a web page that has an embedded short film, and this short film starts right away. So this fits with this criteria, and this page should contain a button that says pause the movie to allow the user to pause the film and then cut the sound, right? And after that, they explain a test procedure that you can use. So here you load a web page, you check that the music and the sound starts, and then you should have a control that allows the user to turn off the sound, provided at the beginning of the page. So we just saw one criterion. Hope it wasn't too much. What do you think? Are you happy, or was it a lot? Raise your hand if it was a lot. I don't see a lot of people, so that sounds okay. Okay, so the complete WCAG, I basically just 87 times this. It's true that it's a lot, but at the same time, I mean, we all learn things over time, right? Like none of us has learned HTML or JavaScript in one day or in one online tutorial. We learned this over years. So accessibility can be seen the same way. You won't go from 0 to hero in 2 seconds. Okay, we're arriving at the end of the presentation. We've already seen why WCAG is important. Then we saw what it's made of. Now the last thing I want to talk about is one way to concretely use it in your day-to-day to make better decisions about accessibility. So on this slide, you can see a small accessibility bugs backlog. It's just a list of 3 accessibility issues. So the first is text has insufficient color contrast, button target size is too small, 40 by 40 pixel, and video autoplays without audio control. That's the one we saw before. So I'm pretty sure you all worked with bug backlogs or feature backlogs in the past, and you know that if you don't give any priority to the bugs you find in your backlog, they're never going to get tackled, or they're never going to get tackled in the right order. So it would be a loss to address anything that's non-critical before addressing what's critical. So it's the same for accessibility. And I don't know about you, but I don't think it's that easy out of the box to prioritize, for example, those 3 issues and be like, okay, if the business impact is the same, then what should I fix first? So for most developers, it's not easy. And here I just have 3 issues. Imagine if I have 50 of them. So how to prioritize? Well, that would be nice to have some kind of framework that allow you to rank accessibility issue by level of importance. And I hope you get where I'm going. WCAG does that for us. We saw that all criteria are classified with a level, A, AA, or AAA, which is a level of importance. So those levels can directly be used to assess the severity of an accessibility issue. So the only thing we have to do is to look into the list of requirements and to find, okay, which requirement is associated with this issue. So we know already about the audio control one. What about the others? Well, I'm going to fill that for you. Insufficient color contrast is an AA level criteria, and target size smaller than 44 pixel is a AAA level one. And so that's it. With that, we can effectively prioritize our issues, and most importantly, we know what should be tackled first. So in conclusion, now it's really the end of the presentation. Just do a tiny little recap. Why you should learn about WCAG? Well, first, it's the most important accessibility standard. It's the main one, it's the one that's meant to stay, and it's the one that laws are referring to. Second thing, it shows you how to do things right. If you don't know how to use area, if you're not sure how to write a proper HTML to fix an issue, you'll find the answer there. Third, it explains why it's important. I think it's one of the most important things because we often know what some accessibility issues are, but we don't really know why. And as a result, we are not able to process it as easily. We're not able to prioritize things. So WCAG is going to give you that. And finally, it provides a nice framework for prioritization. And that's it. I'm done. Thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you. I start with a question, if you agree.
Go for it.
Who is the responsible in the team, in the work team? Who is the responsible? The product, the development, the design? Who?
I mean, everybody's responsible, right? I feel like everybody's responsible on different levels. I would say the product side, the person should make sure that this is something that's on the table if nobody else thought about this, right? On the design side, well, the person should try to see at the moment of prototyping what are the problems that can arise, and ideally, they cannot do that alone, right? Like, let's say you're developing a complex widget for a website. The designer has to talk with the developer to think about what is the best way to do that? What are the problems that can arise? And the developer is the most technical person, probably, is the one that might know the more details about the implementation, but not everything about accessibility is about implementation, right? A lot of things can be solved at a design level. So that's why everybody has a role, but at different stages. I don't know if I answers your question or...
Yeah.
Yeah? Cool.
Okay, I'm coming. What's your name?
Marco, hi. So last time Europe introduced a big legislation around GDPR. A lot of got to the last minute and then scrambled to fix it. Do you see the same happening with this? Like, do you see companies getting to the deadline and all of a sudden every front-end person in the world will be poached to get fixing this? How do you see this development going on?
Sorry, I didn't hear well because of the sound volume, but what you say is like, do you see like companies rushing on the last moment
with GDPR,
to fix the issues, no?
As soon as it became enforced, companies scrambled to get over the basics at the last minute because they ignored it for a long while. It feels like there is a disconnect between legal and tech in most companies anyway. Do you see the same happening with this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing about the laws is that it's very difficult to enforce this type of laws, right? It's like you won't have like a policeman that's going to serve on the internet and be like, oh, this website, this button doesn't have an area label. Like, it's not going to happen like this, right? But what's likely to happen, at least from what has been happening in the United States for the past years, is that consumers start to sue companies that are not accessible. And you have, let's say, associations of disabled people who just want to access some basic services. So they do this work. And they're going to go on the website, and if it doesn't work, they're going to file a complaint, and then the judge is going to order that you make the website accessible and that you pay a fine. And this is something that's happening a lot. And I've been working at Shopify. I can tell you that over there, we have many merchants that have been affected by that. And then they come to us and they're like, hey, my online store has this issue, and the court ordered me to fix it, but I don't know how to fix it. And if it's happening to them, I think it's going to happen here the same. I don't think people are going to rush to solve the issues by the time that the law applies, but I think people are going to start receiving complaints and are going to start to have to make things accessible. And they will do it at this moment when they're going to be constrained to do it. I hope this answers.
Okay, thank you. My name is Massimo. What do you think about accessibility overlays? Do they solve anything?
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of social media posts about this. I think the general consensus is that accessibility overlays aren't as good. They're usually pushed by companies that they have interest to sell you, a plugin. And they have usually interest to tell you that this is going to solve all of your problems, which is not the case. So the thing is that like people with different disabilities use different type of assistive technologies. So it means if you, I don't know, you're blind and you use a screen reader, you don't really care about accessibility overlay because you already have the best assistive technology that's meant for you. So I think as a developer, we see like, oh, I have something to make the text bigger, it's nice, I have something to change the color, it looks nice. But as somebody who has a disability and who has any way to, who needs a way to access the web like overall, not like a specific website, then overlay don't really matter. Like, so that's my position.
Okay. What's your name?
Hello, Pierre. How do I, no, we all assume that these overlays are a catastrophe. How do I convince my company not to buy them? Because once they're bought, put them on my site, right?
I think one thing you can tell them is that first it's going to cost them money, very likely. I mean, unless, I don't know, you're doing a WordPress website and you have a free plugin, very often you're charged for using this. And it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be protected against like lawsuits. So yeah, I think I would go on it depends, you know, how the leaders are at the company, but usually when you go on the money side, you're like, oh, you're spending money for something that's not useful. People are like, I don't know, count how much it costs you and give, you know, developer 1 day a week or 1 day a month, you know, to fix accessibility issues. Probably a better way to handle this. I hope it will help your case. Good luck with that.
Okay, we have a question from home. The first is from Andrea Disperati. Does following the WCAG standards have any impact on the SEO? SEO?
Any impact on the SEO? In general, good accessibility tends to be good for SEO because good accessibility tends to be about following web standards. It tends to be about I don't know, like things like link purpose, you know, make sure that the content of your link indicates where it goes to. This is good for accessibility, this is good for SEO. It's about organizing your content in a way that's easy for people to comprehend. This is something that most search engines value too. So in general, if you do things to improve accessibility, you're gonna have a website that has better SEO. Or I don't see a case where it can have a bad impact to improve accessibility.
Okay, thank you. And now Raihan Nismara. How to achieve unit testing with accessibility aspect?
It's an interesting question. There's some libraries that you can use for that. Like, for example, there's this project that's called Axe. They offer some, I don't know, testing libraries that you can use with Jest, for example, and React that are gonna help you to test some aspects like was an area label added or things like that. You have also some linters that exist. I know for React, I think there's some for Vue too. There's probably from JavaScript as well. Things that will, for example, give you a warning if you, I know, put a click event on div and you don't put a keyword event. So I think these are some of the best tools that you can use to fix the errors before they go to production.
Okay, thank you. What's your name?
Hey, I'm Kai. So first question would be, you quit your job at Shopify. Did you already sign somewhere else?
No, I have not. I'm taking time off.
Okay, that's good to know.
I see.
A second question is we provide central tooling, basically a design system. And we don't really have an impact directly on the accessibility of our products because, well, they consume our tooling and what do we know what they do? Is there some general resource you can share or guidelines how we can ensure that on our end accessibility is as good as it can get?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I've been working on component libraries too and design systems, and it's difficult because accessibility is very context dependent. you can make like a component that's accessible in isolation, but that won't be accessible in the page for a ton of other reasons that you cannot imagine. So I think it's not easy. I think if you have a design system like this that some other people can use, a great way is to use some documentation. It can be just written, but at least like something written on the components or something like that, but something that already maybe gives clues to people about, okay, this is a typical issue you could have with this, so just think about that. Or like this component is following this area pattern, for example. So if the person wants to use it in a way that's more custom for any reason, then they have some help to know what to look for, about what's the good pattern. But yeah, I don't think there's a magic solution for that. It's not easy problem, in my opinion.
Okay. You have a question. What's your name?
Luca. Test. So I was wondering if you knew what level of compliance does the European Accessibility Act require. For example, if we comply with the A level, would be that enough, or would we still be exposed to lawsuits, or it's not clear? Do we have to implement everything, or what is good enough? Basically?
Yeah, it's a great question. Most of the laws, they refer to the level AA. So it means you need to have all the A level criteria good and all the AA level criteria good. I think the one thing to take into account is that it's not meant to be stupid, right? Like the levels thing. Like it's like, okay, if something like doesn't matter a lot, like I don't know, if you have a bad color contrast on a text that nobody reads, this is not something that's going to expose you to a lawsuit. But if, I don't know, your login button or your sign up button isn't good, if like the main flows of your website cannot be done by somebody that uses a screen reader, for example, this is going to be an issue. So in that sense, like I did this show about like the prioritization, right? But of course, when you prioritize a bug, it's not just about how bad it is. It's also about, okay, what's the business impact on it? And something that has more business impact will have to be fixed first. And for most websites, it means that the same task that can be executed by somebody that uses a computer and a mouse should be able to be executed by somebody that maybe uses assistive technologies. So, yeah. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, wait a sec. We have a question from home. From, not the first one. Okay. From Matteo Simeonato. Do you think that the WCAG compliance should be a concern of the development team, or there should be a dedicated team?
Should be integrated in the team, or should it be a dedicated team?
Yeah.
I would say it depends what's the size of your company, right? In general, I think it's good that the knowledge is at every level, right? It's like I mean, you can think the same way about, let's say, performance, right? Should every engineer care about performance, or should you have a dedicated team in your company that takes care of that? Well, there might be cases where, I don't know, let's say you have a lot of issues to fix at once. Maybe it makes sense to create a small workforce in the company to fix this, but eventually you want everybody to kind of think about it, or at least you want to have ways to improve the processes for everybody and not just wait for when the thing is ended to have somebody that comes and fix the things.
Great. There was a question here. Okay. What's your name?
On the mic. My name is Lino. Most accessible website you have ever seen?
The best accessible website I've ever seen? I cannot tell you myself as much because also I'm not the assistive technology person user. Like, I mean, I can use it to test, but I don't use it on my day-to-day. What I can tell you, at least from people who use screen readers, that they told me is the company that tend to do the best are the big tech companies like Google, Facebook. They tend to be really good at that, especially Google. I think as they have like, great teams. And also the thing is that we say, okay, 15% of people in the world have a form of disability. Let's say, there's no real statistics about, let's say, how many screen reader users exist, but even if it's like 1% or 0.1%, if Google increases their benefits by 0.1%, it's huge for them. So it's like the companies that I think they do good because maybe they want to do good, but also because the business impact on them is so huge that they would be stupid to not try to fix this. So, but it's a very good example for things, for example, like data visualization. For Google is pretty good at this, as I was told.
Okay, we have another question from home. Francesco Manzoni. Are there any certification for the company to enroll the certificate that their product is accessible?
I mean, certification for the company to say that their website is accessible. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I'm aware of in Europe. There are some things like that in the US, but in Europe I don't think so. I think there's, so what's happening is that typically, let's say you do a website for a government, for example, the level of accessibility you need is higher, right? Or at least, let's say tomorrow Italy makes a website to pay you taxes, this website has to be accessible. So there is more checks on those type of websites to prevent them to be released before, you know, if they have any issues. If you are making website for somebody else, I don't think there's like a, some kind of stamp, you know, you can put on the website. So the most websites they don't stay the same forever, right? So I think it would be difficult to maintain something like that on a website that gets updated every week or every month.
Thank you. Is there? Hi, what's your name?
I'm Massimiliano. I know this is tangential to the point of being probably off topic, but has anybody ever thought about accessibility at the language level, in the sense requiring that it should be translated or translatable or really understandable by a language translator, something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like HTML was made in a way where they were considering accessibility from the beginning, right? It's like if you just have an HTML website from, let's say, 2000, like after the standards are a bit more in place, they're fully compatible with assistive technologies. Now what's happening? Well, we don't have a web of documents anymore. We have a web of applications, and HTML isn't made for that. We have more semantic elements than we had like 20 years ago, but still we don't have, it's not that easy. So that's why we have things like Area that have come in that basically are at the intersection of assistive technology and the language. And maybe that's the closest that we have to like some more like universal accessibility language, but it's not a language, right? So what I show you here is valid for the web, but you have also something similar for mobile apps, let's say, and all mobile apps use HTML, and you still have ways to respect the same guidelines that I showed today. So that's not really an answer, but that's a thought on the topic.
Okay. Who?
Hi, I'm Frederick. I was wondering, so my web application is basically a question mark when it comes to accessibility.
Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation for like good first guidelines to tackle to like show my organization, look how far this got us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first thing I would do is to use, there's some like online checkers. Online checkers are estimated to be able to find about 30% of accessibility issues, so it's not much, but it's already this. You might learn things with that. When I say online checkers, I mean things like Lighthouse as an accessibility thing. You have some, I don't know, a lot of websites that do that. The other thing that can be interesting is to learn to test with screen reader. You don't need to be like a power user or screen reader to do that, but if you're able to perform main tasks like navigating the page by heading, clicking buttons, filling form, it's gonna help you to verify quite a lot of things. So, and then if you have the want to do it, you can use services like Fable. If you heard of this, it's basically companies that offer you accessibility testing as a service. So you can they have different modalities, but basically you can, let's say, book an hour of time to test your website with a physical person that uses assistive technology. You can choose what technology you want. Or they have some type of automated tests as well, or not automated tests, but like self-paced tests where you put your website, you say, these are the tasks that need to be accomplished, and they're going to give it to people who do manual testing. And I'm not sure what's the pricing for this. I used to use this at my company, but I wasn't responsible for paying the bill for it. So I'm not sure what's the money involvement there, but this is pretty interesting because the great thing about that is that you learn about how people actually use things, and it helps you to, relativize a lot, like what's important and what's not. It's like sometimes you're like, I thought this was, very bad for accessibility, and the person is like, it's okay, I can just do that instead, and it doesn't bother them. And some other things that you did not consider, and they're like, well, I just cannot move in the page because of that. So I would try to do that, like do some manual testing in any way.
Great. This is the last question.
My name is Jacob. Actually, I had two questions, and one you are already answered about the tools we can use. But there is a problem with those tools is that, for example, they check for alt text, but you never know if the alt text is matching the image or something like that. And someone who's blind might download that image and send to someone else without knowing that actually it was something else. That was one of the problems with the tools, and I wonder if there is a better tool. And the other question I had was about ethics again, because I have some clients which are telling that, hey, we don't need to care about accessibility because most of our customers do not hire people who have accessibility issues. But isn't that the reason that your tool doesn't support accessibility? That's why your clients don't hire it. And then we get into this loop, and which we cannot get from, and the websites will still be inaccessible for those people with problems.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the first one about automated tools for testing, you're right. Like, alt tag is typically one thing that, the thing with automated accessibility testing is that there's some things that are very easy to test. So these are the things that the automated checker are going to show you, but they're not necessarily the most important. And they're not necessarily checking this in a good way. I mean, if you have a decorative image, you don't need an alt attribute on your image. But most checkers will tell you, hey, you're missing it here. So that's why they say about 30% of issue can be found with that. Manual testing is the way to find all the others. And then about the how do you say, the snake that eats its tail, and you say that, like about the primal accessibility. I feel like if people don't want to invest in this, they won't invest in this, right? Convincing people is not that easy. I think any company that wants to be a company that is, I don't know, scalable, or a company that wants to grow has to consider this. If they think like they don't have, their customers don't have accessibility needs, it's a lie. This is not true. There might be a situation where right now there's none, but it doesn't mean there will never be, and doesn't mean there should not. So I'm not sure how to convince them, but I think all big companies have to do this, and there's a lot of that. I was at Shopify. We had accessibility bugs tickets quite often. There's a lot of people who are blind and have an online store, or are editing content, or are writing content. I mean, so yeah, it's also not an answer, but yeah, that's my opinion on the topic.
Thank you so much for this. There's been a marathon of questions, so thank you. Resiliency.